Right. Here we are, live, hopefully. So, oh my gosh, Joanna, yes, isn't it scary? July. Oh, that's terrifying, isn't it? I actually started thinking about Christmas today. Now, I am looking at the screen and it looks again like I'm a little bit frozen this week. So I am going to come out of my computer. That has made no difference. I tested this about 20 minutes ago and it was all fine. So I don't really know what happens as soon as it goes live. But anyway, here we are. So the July Janome Stitch Club. Hello and welcome. My name is Julia. I'm one of the Janome educators. And what we've been doing is once a month, we've been looking at some of the stitches and feet, etc., and the various functions on your Janome sewing machines with some little projects to get you using them, hopefully. Now, as this is live, you can put comments up and I should be able to see the comments. Also, it's really helpful if you can do some little thumbs up at times, or let me know if there's a problem, if you've not heard something. I know there's a few of you in already, so hello and good evening. And what we'll do is we'll get started talking about what we're going to do this week. So who have we got? Joanna, hello. And I know Maureen is there, and I've turned the computer off. Leslie, that was it. And Fliss, I think, has just come in as well. So hello, good evening. So this week, one of my favorite things to do, the feather stitches, the leaf stitches. Oh my goodness, I love those. Oh, well, I love a fancy stitch, let's be honest. And these are some of my favorites. So who is that? Wendy, hello. So I thought we'd start having a look at some of those. They're among my favorite stitches because one of the things I love doing is sort of just little pictorial things. And so this week I've done these little sort of postcards with some of the stitches, and I've done some of them patchwork, as you can see, and I've also done some using this. I don't think you can see this one particularly well. It's much better on this one, chenilling, okay, which I quite like using in these sorts of things for just giving you a bit of texture. And we're kind of always looking for texture in these sort of pictures and things. Joanna, they are very addictive, I have to say. Partly because you can do them out of scraps. They don't take very long. You can just really mess around, and that's one of my favourite things to do. I've done them on, reasonably stiff. I put a bit of wadding felt, I think I put behind a lot of them. And then I've actually done, made them into a postcard. I haven't posted any of these, but I do know somebody who has made and posted fabric postcards. So I think I might post a couple of these and see if they arrive. If you want one posted, just send me a PM with your address and I'll post one and we'll test out the theory. So the stitches we're looking at are, and here's my large version, the things like feather stitches, as I said, and now they will, nearly every machine has got, apart from the very basic ones, you've probably got some form of feather stitch, and it'll either look like these two here or something like this here. Would you know, Fliss, you say about attaching the stamp? That's what I haven't worked out yet. So if you could put your suggestions in, please, because even though we used to run a post office, I don't know how we have to do that. I might have to look that one up, because I'm sure there's post office regulations about such things. So we're looking at these kinds of things. We're also looking at if you've got quite a few stitches on there. So on the other page here, then the ones I'm talking about are things like this, where you've actually got leaves, and look, there's quite a few on here. Okay, so if you have a look at the stitches on your machine, you're just looking for anything that might look like leaves, grasses, that kind of thing. There is a download. I mean, these are fairly basic, but I thought I'd give you some templates anyway. And I've just done a few basic shapes for trees. The ones that I like the best actually are what I sort of term as the lollipop trees. So this sort of thing, or just the little circles. They just look very, very cute and don't need to be in green. But I was doing a class the other day, and we were looking at mirroring and stitching of various stitches, and this was the project we did, which is a similar thing. These have just been bond-webbed on, so you don't have to do necessarily the technique I'm going to show you tonight. You can keep it much simpler and just bond-web your shapes and then stitch over the top. But the ones that I have done here, and this is a case in point, the tree at the back, the pink, is bond-webbed on. This one at the front, I don't know if you can see, but it's stuffed. So I've put a little bit of stuffing. I've used an applique technique, a sort of faux needle turn. I don't know what the proper name for it is, because everyone I know seems to use a different term. But you do all of it on the machine, and then you can either stitch it on by hand or machine. Obviously, I'm going to use the machine. We've already looked at the blanket stitch, but I just wanted to show you one of the other blanket stitches, the very teeny tiny one. I'm not going to use monofilament tonight because it's obviously invisible, and that makes it quite hard on camera. But I am going to show you that stitch to use. So basically you can get a technique where it looks as if it's been done by hand. You can't see the stitching that's holding it down, and that can be extremely nice to use as well. So why don't we turn around to the machine. Let me get a few of these things. I always end up with so many things, and if I put them down there, I'll be looking for them in a minute. We'll turn around to the machine and do our usual thing. Oh, look, there's Barbie in her hat just up there to say hello. And what we are going to do this week, I've got lots of new lighting this week. So, oh, let's come here. Oh, ping. Let's come up here first, because I want to show you on this screen, okay? Because as usual, I think it shows. So this is the kind of thing I always do first up. I actually stitch things out, because when you stitch them out, as I always say, you kind of see what they're doing, what they look like, and what they'd be useful for. Now, what I have done, and I think these are ones that I did on my 7mm machine by the look of it, I've stitched it with its serving suggestion first, and then the next row I've stitched it again. But you notice on this one, I've taken the width setting right down at the top there, and then I've fattened it out as I've gone down. Okay, and I've done that again here. But can you see how these just look so much more leafy, realistic, more like grasses, don't they? So show you here, this is just the feather stitching, the basic feather stitching. So this is the one that comes up as your serving suggestion on your machine, but this is where I've taken it right down, and it looks much, much more like a grass, you know, and I've used a variegated thread here as well, actually, which looks rather nice. And this one here as well, But what I wanted to show you is, you'll notice on here I've got finish and start written, because that's the important thing. When you're looking at these stitches, what you also want to know is which way the leaves are facing. That's really important. So I've put in some dark brown, so I'm hoping that you'll be able to see this. So if we look first on here, and I'm going to go on to that stitch there, can you see the stitches are pointing up that way? Okay, there is another stitch here, they're pointing the opposite direction. So it's quite important to know that, so that when you're stitching your grass or your leaf or whatever, they're facing the right way. So I'm going to stitch that out, like I say, serving suggestion. So I'm on the widest width, I'm on 9mm here. So let's bring it over here. Okay. And this time I'm going to take my stitch width, so the wobbly width. Okay, if you're on another machine, it's the one that goes like that. I always think it looks like a W, so it's W for wobbly width. I'm going to take that right down. I'm going to take that down to about 3. Okay, I'm going to bring that up. So, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to start stitching, and then as I'm stitching, I'm going to, you can hear me bipping as I go down, because every couple of stitches I'm taking the length up, and I'm now up to just short of 6mm there. So I've gone from 3 to 6, but look, can you see the difference? And this is the kind of thing, you might not necessarily want them to be this wide, but that looks much more organic than that. And this is what I'm always looking for with these sorts of embroidery stitches, because if I was doing this by hand, I'd have complete control, wouldn't I, of being able to change the look of each stitch if I wanted to. And that's kind of what you want sometimes, isn't it, with this kind of thing, that you want them to be slightly different so that it looks more natural. So the other stitch I was going to show you is that one. Sorry, that one, I don't know if you can see this screen. The trouble is, if I put a light on it, it makes it flicker. So this one here, which is going to be the wrong way up. Now, I've mentioned this before, if you have mirroring on your machine and it's these little half moon buttons here, I can press that and look, can you see it's now the right way up? So as I stitch that, it's now facing the same way as the other leaves. If you don't have mirroring, you just have to turn your work round. Okay. Yeah, does it look okay to you? Maybe it's just me then. I find that sometimes actually, that I look back and it's okay, but it looks dark on my phone. So like I say, that mirroring is quite interesting, because if I'm going to go back to this one, because this is the one that I'm probably going to use more. So I'm taking it down again. I'm going to go down to about 4, because I'm going to, sorry, I have to keep pinging you backwards and forwards. I'm going to start stitching down here, and I'm not going to change it. Oh, I was still mirrored, hang on. That was going to be my next, let's go on to a new piece. That was going to be my next comment, is use the mirroring if you've got a good memory. That probably says it all about me, doesn't it? So anyway, I'm now going in that direction. When I stop, I'm going to pivot, drop the presser foot again, and now I'm going to mirror. So I've just pressed the mirroring, it's turned it around, which means when I come up the other side, there we go, they're facing the right direction. Okay, so I've managed to do that, and that is exactly what I've been doing on these trees. So I have marked out what I've got in my little box of stuff. Well, Diana, that's multitasking. I'm most impressed. I've had to turn my laptop off because I thought it was affecting the picture, but I don't know if it is. But I've got these sorts of circles and leaves and things cut out in my, from Applique, this plastic template stuff that you can get. I think So Easy do it. And I've got lots of different shapes cut out in this that I use all the time for Applique. So these are quite useful when you're just drawing lots of these, because, you know, you need a woodland really, don't you? So I'm going to unmirror so that I'm facing the right direction, and then I can just start stitching down here. And like I say, I'm not changing the width on this because these are so small, these little projects. I've taken the width down, so I am on 4, so I'm not terribly wide, because obviously a 9 or 7 is going to be way too big for these little fellas. But I've just gone down there, mirrored, gone up the other side, and I can do that again on this one. Foot. I knew that I was going to keep forgetting to do this. Okay. Foot wise, I should have mentioned that at the beginning. Usual thing, I'm using the Applique foot, so either use F2 if you, that's the one, the F foot is the one that you'll probably have, you get with your machine, and it's the one that's got the groove in the bottom, so it works quite nicely over that. F2 is the open toe version of that, so can you see? And I think I've mentioned that before. It's the Custom Craft Zigzag foot, I do believe, is its very snappy, short, catchy name. But I love this foot, absolutely love this foot. If you got a quilting kit with your machine, you would probably have got it in there. Okay, if not, that's my top recommendation. So I have unmirrored a few, so I'm going to run down here into where the stem is. Might just shift it, needle up, down, just shift it along a little bit. These are all done with friction pen, so they're going to rub off. Mirror it again, come up the other side. And do try and turn as well. Don't keep them necessarily completely straight. So like I say, this one here is just the basic feather stitch. I'll have a look at the leafy one in a minute. Turn it, press the foot down and mirror. And off we go. There we go. I haven't locked off on each of these stitches because I think with this sort of stuff it's not always necessary, is it? I trim those up out of the way and you can kind of see where we're going with that. So we've got some nice leaves going on there. On the back, as ever, I've stabilized, okay, and this is tear away. If you haven't got any stabilizer to hand, and I am tearing this away partly because I don't want the bulk in the seams when I do the next part of this process, but you could, if you wanted to, and depending on what you're using these for actually, but you can just use a lot of starch so that this is really stiff. But generally speaking, I would always use some form of stabilizer when I'm doing these kinds of fancy stitches because they just look so much better. So having done my leaves and branches on my tree, to get to the stuffed part of the exercise, I've now got sewing interfacing, and I'm laying that on top, so think of it as right sides facing, okay, and I can now see that line, and that's going to be my stitching line. So I'm going back to my regular straight stitch, but my straight stitch, my tiny straight stitch, so I'm stitching that at 1. I've taken it right down to 1 for when I'm doing this, so that I can be really nice and smooth as I go around those curves. And like I say, I use this method a lot for applique, because especially for circles and curves and shapes like that, it is a sort of cheats needle turn, really. So regardless of whether I'm finishing off on the machine or by hand, and that depends on the project I'm doing, I can get all of my prep done. So I can get all of the prep done, ready, and then they can just sit in my sewing box waiting. So if it was for a big quilt project or something, I can do all of this. If it's got loads, like say it was for a border and you had about 60 or 70 of these, you can get them all done, trimmed up and turned, and then just add them on. So I've gone all the way round there, and then the next thing is I'm going to trim up really close, straight across the top. So I'm just getting rid of the bulk for when I turn it, because whatever happens, it is going to get stitched down again. And then I'm just going to slide my scissors, my little sharp ones, in to make a hole, and then turn it through. And basically what's happening is that then becomes your needle turn. So it's taking over from that job, because needle turn's quite a tricky technique anyway, and it does take a while. So this is, if I'm teaching it, this is my first port of call, because I think this kind of gets you in the zone for it, really. So you can see that what it's done is it's just turned under that tiny, and it's like 1/8 of an inch seam all the way around. Okay, so that's what you get on the top. So you get a nice clean finish, and as I say, you can just then stitch in there, and I normally poke that under if I don't want any stitching showing at all. Or you can use, I'm going to show you in a minute, you can use one of the tiny blanket stitches, and I'll change the settings so that you can barely see that as well. But what I love about this is that it does mean you can stuff it. So somewhere in one of my drawers, got a little bit of stuffing. So there are different ways of doing this. I mean, crikey, there are different ways of doing every form of sewing, I would say. Trapunto is the name for stuffed patchwork. It always makes me think of those very old-fashioned eider downs that used to be so heavy you could barely move once you were under them. So there's just that little bit of stuffing in there. But look, we've now got quite a lumpy, bumpy one there, which can then get sewn down. And as it's sewn down, look, you'll see how lumpy that is. Now, I just wanted to very quickly show you this chenilling. What I've done is I have got 3 layers, scraps of colour here. One's a yellow and it's got sort of flowery bits on it, and then 2 different greens. I have then stitched down the first one. I've just used a variegated thread and a zigzag. I've got on this machine, I think it's on the other one as well. Where's my book gone? There it is. As while we're on the subject of favourite stitches, is it on this one? Oh, do you know, I don't think it was. No, it wasn't on. Which one is this? This is the 5 to 70. It's on the M200. That's what's confusing me. However, you do have there's a blanket stitch that changes. Where is it? Where is it? There it is. So you've got a stitch like this that's changing its length. So that one works quite well, where you close it up so it's almost like a satin stitch. You can take the stitch length down and then do so you get this sort of grassy effect at the top. Okay, the one I'm talking about on this machine, if I can show you, let me go to the applique stitches. It's these ones here. So they're a satin stitch, and there's either a straight edge one, which works really nicely, or this completely variegated one. Oh, I love these stitches, especially if you're doing things like this, like grass, or if you're doing around petals on flowers, and you don't want a completely straight edged finish. You know, some flowers and some petals have like fluffy edges, don't they? Almost like a beardy edge. So yeah, great stitch. Right, what I've then done, again, I'm on that very, very small straight stitch, and I've just wiggled along here various lines, and then you can get a gadget, a chenilling gadget, or you can go old school and just cut. I'm gonna have to come back, there we go, and just cut between those lines. And what you can do is you can choose which layers you're cutting. So on this one, I've cut through the 2 layers down to that bottom layer, and then about halfway along I'm just going back in to the top layer. Okay, and then you fray it out, and my usual method for doing that is you just pick it a little bit like that, just to start it off. Start it both sides, but you can see that you end up seeing the fabric that's underneath. The other thing, oh sorry, forgot about that, so reaching behind me, toothbrush. This is going to shake the camera now. One of the best fabrics for this is actually oak shot, which is like the clue's in the name. They're shot fabrics, so the weave is really open, and they've got 2 different colours, and they look fantastic for this technique. Where are they? Oh yeah, look, I've used it on here. Can you see? So this is just one fabric, that light green and that dark green, but it looks fantastic. So that is a great fabric for this process. So like I say, you'll see the different colours show through, so you'll get shots of that limey green underneath, and then it looks like the flowers in the grass. So that's the chenilling. That was a very, very quick run through of chenilling, but I think you got that. So having done that background, I'll continue with that later. Why don't we actually look at putting this on, because we are going to use, again, I'm on that open toe foot, and I'm going to use the brown partly because I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going back, I'm still in the applique stitches, and what I'm looking for is the very small applique stitch. So it's the one that looks like it's got just, it's a single line. So this one here, for example, where look, you've only got a single line. These ones are doubling it, whereas this one isn't. So this one, or this, yeah, this one looks lighter, so I think it's this one. And remember we said about the middle and the right, so depends on where you prefer your setting. So I'm going to get in nice and close, and what I'm also going to have to hand is my unpicker, because I'm going to use that to hold it down, because I don't want to be putting my finger in here. Okay, but I'm going to change that setting. At the moment it's giving me 2.5 for the stitch width, so and that's the teeth rather than the gum, so I'm going to take that right down, so it's just going to nip over and take a tiny little stitch, so it's on 1. Okay, and I'm going to take it to 3, the stitching in between, and we'll just test that one out. So like I say, I've got my seam ripper here because I can use that, and I'm hoping you can see this, to just catch hold of that interfacing and just roll it under. Okay, so I'm going to put that needle down and then off we go. And like I say, I would usually be using either a colour that matches. Now that looks to me, we can take that up because the 1 is right on the stitch width, because it's just taken a tiny bite, but it's doing it far too often. We'll be here forever. So there we go. So as I say, if you've got a monofill, one of those invisible threads doing this, only on the top, not in the bobbin, but you will barely see this, or you match your thread as accurately as possible. So we're up to the top. I mean, I don't mind necessarily seeing it, because this is a very even stitch. So I've got my pivot on, which is great in some ways, but not at the very top. So again, I can see that white. I'm going to take that pin out now because it's going to be in my way. I can see that white, so I'm just rolling it under as I come down the side here. It's much easier to do this if you don't have a camera between yourself and your machine, by the way. So apologies if this isn't as accurate and straight as it could be. Okay, down the bottom, and I'm just going to finish that couple of stitches there. Remember, always that sort of 1 stitch at a time, but I can get in there. There. So like I say, tiny stitch going around there. Probably could have spread it out even more, so you're taking less stitches. And then the final thing is we need to do a tree trunk. But can you see how padded that is? But the tree trunk, this is the fun bit, because if you then start stitching, I'm going to go into my triple stitch and then stitch from the top. What I love about this is, again, this is going to change the look of it. I'm sort of swiveling this around a bit just to catch those branches, and then I can go down here, and then I'm just going to go up to the side there just to thicken out the trunk a little bit. There we go. So I'm just very slightly on the side, just so that I can thicken it out, and then I'll stop so it's down into the single. There we go. So look, we've now got, can you see that shaping on there? And I can then do more, because what I've done on several of these is I've gone in and done, this one didn't show up as well. I do find that the dark stitching looks great because you can see all the detail. Actually, when you're using something like this patterned fabric with this green stitching, it didn't show up, and I wished afterwards I'd actually used that dark green to do the leafy stitch as well. But again, if I hold it like that, you can see the texture on it. These would be great if you were doing like a baby quilt or something like that. I always think with baby quilts you need to be doing things with lots of texture to them, because they like squishing those, don't they? But there's one little, I'm sorry about the bottom there. I'm just going to hold my finger there to cover that. But like I say, much easier if you don't have a camera between you. So if you want to add in more detail, if you're doing a bigger tree, so this one here, for example, again, I've kept the shape very, very simple. Done my leaf stitching here, and I've done more branches on this one because obviously I've got more room. And then I've just used the satin stitch down here, and I've started very, very narrow width and then fattened it out as I've come down there to do that. And then on these ones I've done that tiny little straight stitch, and I've added in sort of those, well, you can see it on the orange really clearly, I've added in those extra branches and detail as well. This is one of my favorites, this leaf. Let's do that one actually. Oh look, I've unthreaded myself again. This is the trouble, keep unthreading. Is everybody still all right on this? Any questions? You're all being very quiet this month. So let's look at that leaf one, because if you have got that one, do have a play. It's in the decoratives, and there's usually quite a few nice decorative ones actually. So if I stitch it, if I just stitch it out, actually, Joanna, threads, good point. I'm just using bog standard. In fact, I think this brown is actually a moon thread because it was the darkest brown that I had. I am also very partial with this sort of stuff to the Gutermann's do these lovely variegateds. Do be careful because there's one that's much thicker. This is the cotton 30. There's another one, I can't remember what it's called, but it's much, much thicker. I bought it by mistake once and it didn't work quite as well on the machine. And also these ones here, these shiny ones, these are Madeira, and again they do a lovely line in variegated. But somewhere, there it is, this little one here, now he looks like it's the leaf stitch, but it's not the leaf stitch. This is the very basic feather stitch. Where is it? It's this stitch here, the feather stitch, but it has been done, and I can't find it. Where is it? There we go. It's been done with a top stitch thread, okay, which, as you can see, much thicker. Now, if you're using top stitch, don't put it in the bobbin, just use it on the top, but do make sure you've got a top stitch needle. I've got the Janome red needle in here, which is a top stitch, and it's a size 14, because not only do you need a bigger needle, but you also need a bigger eye in the needle for threading. You might find that your threader doesn't like this because it is too thick. Okay, so like I say, I normally just trim it up and thread it the old-fashioned way. But that's the important thing, is the needle, to make sure you've got a big enough eye in the needle. But it does look rather lovely. You get these top stitch threads in. To be honest, I use these for all sorts of things. I even use it for hand quilting, believe it or not. But yeah, look, it looks like it's actually been hand stitched, doesn't it? Which is what we're looking for, isn't it? We love a bit of a cheat, because if you wanted to make a whole forest out of these, you know, that certainly speeds up the job, doesn't it? So back to our leaf stitch. This is the regular settings. So I'm going to take it right down to 3. So it's going to start really, really narrow. And then once again, I'm on my stitch width. If you're on a dial, you can slowly twist the dial, or if you've got button control, then I sometimes put a little bit of blue tack near the button, so I kind of, because I'm watching this and then I know that I'm getting it in the right place as I go. On this one it's quite easy because of where I hold my thumb. So as I start stitching, I can then just start taking that width up. And then what I also like to try and do is kind of move it as well, so that it's not completely straight. It's a little bit of the, you know, rubbing, what is it, rubbing your tummy and scratching your head at the same time or something. But it does take practice. And what I will say is I'm going at quite a speed there. But it is the kind of thing that I do actually think sometimes it's a little bit like free motion. It's easier when it's faster in a way, but you can keep your speed down and then just change it slowly, but you'll get a much smoother graduation and line if you can keep your speed up while you're doing that. But like I say, it does give a really pretty effect. So if I bring you back to the front now, because I think we're, ooh, hello, there we go. Ooh. Hang on. So what I was going to show you is, this is a much bigger one I've been working on. But look, all of these leaves that I've started on down here, these have all been done, grasses, sorry, not leaves, grasses. I've chenilled it all first, and then I've stitched all these grasses over the top. And then what eventually I can do, I can change up and do some with the top stitch thread so that they're coming towards you, so they're a lot heavier, and then maybe even some hand stitching as well, so that you've just got that complete graduation, all those different shapes and things. So again, chenilled on here, and these little trees, I've just used all different stitches on each one of these. Again, they've been padded, but with these I did actually stitch these on by hand, so I've been able to change the shape slightly, because this is what I mean if you don't want to have that stitching showing around the edge. But what I also wanted to show you is, yes, we've been doing little pictures and things like that, but if you were to do it, say, on a border for a quilt, because who doesn't love a leafy border? Look how pretty these look, and look, that one there with a variegated thread, absolutely lovely. Or if it wasn't on a quilt, that would look fantastic around the bottom of a skirt or a coat or a jacket or something like that, wouldn't it? Especially like a denim skirt with some applique leaves with all that detail on. When you are doing something like that, somebody just asked a question, I'll go back to that. Again, I've got stitch and tear on the back of this one, and I would definitely use that on clothing or wash away stabilizer, so I've got something there. But it does mean that it's a lot neater on the back if you're using it for clothing. However, if you're using it for quilting, I wouldn't be doing this kind of detail through the wadding as well. I've said to you before, I can't remember what we were doing, but what I would normally do is I would have some kind of stabilizer or starch it within an inch of its life, do all of this stitching, and then make my quilt sandwich, layer it up with the batting and the backing, and then quilt around the, you probably, you know, just quilt around the leaf shapes as you go around. Or you can leave that center bit and do that through all the layers as well. So like I say, lots of options there for little things or big things to make with those stitches. I have had a few, oh, Fliss, that was it, finishing the postcards off. Now, what I have done is I've put a piece of calico behind it. So most of these I made a bit like this, really scruffy. I've then put the calico behind it. I've cheated here because I could have done it free motion. I think I did do free motion on one of them, but I have used one of the pens that doesn't wash off. I'll think of the name in a minute. I'll find it in a minute. So I've just put calico on the back, and then I've cut with my rotary cutter, so I get a really neat cut. And then I have used, and I will put it on the machine actually. Let me turn back round because I think this is worth talking about. So for example, if I just quickly trim the side up there, so it's all trim and neat and the backing is on, I would then be using this foot, the overcast foot, the over edge foot. This is the one that gives you a stitch more or less like an overlock. Okay, so the stitch you're looking for, oh, ping, tried some WD-40, it didn't work on me or the stand, but it's these stitches that you have for giving a finish to things so that it looks like it's been overlocked. Now, because this foot, I'm going to put the white under it so you can see. Whoop, there we go. So it's going to do a stitch here, and it's got these two little wires, so when it does its little zigzag, this runs right along the edge, and the zigzag kind of goes over to hold the edge, and it does give a really neat finish for this sort of thing. Again, you can take the stitch length down so you can make it closer if you want, but like I say, and as I get to the end I can swivel around, drop it again, and off we go again. But look, you can see it gives you a very, very neat edge. So if I stop there, just to show you, look at that. So nice and neat. And as I say, it's done a pretty good job actually of finishing these off. What was the name of the pen? Here we go. Archive-Link Micron, because they're quite fine, so if you do need to write addresses and things like that on, then you can. Or like I say, if you're a bit of a free motion fiend, then you could do it with free motion if you wanted to. Speaking of which, there is Stacey Chapman from Artsy Craftsy is running a competition at the moment for little stitched postcards using free motion. I think I posted something on my thing, and there's been lots of stuff. It's on the Janome website as well. I've started my prototype, but there's quite a lot of stuff, so well worth having a look at that if you haven't done any free motion. Stacey's absolutely brilliant. I might have to cheat with mine for the lettering. I mean, I've got lettering on the machine, so but anyway, don't tell Stacey that. I think she probably knows that I'm a terrible cheat, because that's what this is all about, isn't it? So that's this week's little project, this month, sorry. So next month, oh my goodness, August. So next month, it's all about string. Now, that'll get you thinking. I've been playing with I've got a beading foot. Well, feet, actually, there are two. There's a narrow and a wide one. And so I think we might have a little play. I've got this cork, so I've made this little bag. It's not quite finished yet, but I don't know if you can see, this is over string here, some of the stitches that you've got that you can use. And like I say, I thought that would be, I've even used it on the strap, look, to make the strap. I thought that would be quite a nice one to look at, also because we can look at different feet as well. If anyone is going to Festival of Quilts, then see you there. Do wave, do say hello. And if you want to have a look at any of these machines with the fancy stitches, do come on over. And I hope you have a lovely summer, and see you at the end of August.